Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. On behalf of Morehouse College, our president, Dr. John Sylvanus Wilson, and Dr. Lawrence Edward Carter, Dean of the Martin Luther King Jr. International Memorial Chapel, I am pleased to call the roll of the 2015 inductees into the Board of Preachers, Sponsors, and Collegium Scholars. Would you please stand as your names are called and remain standing until all names have been called? I ask the audience to please hold your applause until all names have been called. Parvez Ahmed, Scott C. Alexander, William Lloyd Allen, Abdullah T. Int'l, Loy Ashton, Yüksel Alp Aslandogan, Joseph R. Benkoff, Abbas Barzagar, Michael B. Bernstein, Jerry D. Black, Jean C. Blue, Jürgen Brower, Angela L. Buchanan, Quincy Lavelle Carswell, Anwarul K. Chowdhury, Peter Allen Cohen, Catherine Rose Crosby, Suleiman Erish, David G. Evans, John Lewis Ford, Horace L. Griffin, Monte Oyd Harris, Durant Kevin Harvin III, Adel Wahab Hiba Heshish, Jesse Eugene Harriott, Dante Hickman, James Bork Hestery, Millicent Hunter, Thomas J. Hines Jr., Frank William Johnson Jr., Freddie L. Johnson, Tyrone Powell Jones IV, Sumaya Khalifa, Turan Kilich, Mehmet Kemalettin Karuju, Cullen C. Larson, Sir Walter Mack Jr., Injabulo Shimakale Indebele, Sofia Pandia, Richard Penaskovic, Marcus Regalado, Mustafa Shaheen, Gwendolyn Simmons, Andre Dwayne Singleton, Sharif Soidan, Warren Hampton Stewart, Jr., Brenda Bunch Strickland, Duncan E. Teague, James B. Tyson, Ernest Urquhart, Michelle E. Urquhart, Dolores Voorhees, Howard John Wesley. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in giving these honorees an applause.
Good morning. I will deliver the charge that is found on the back of your programs for those of you in the audience, and for our souvenir journal, it's on page 7 for our inductees behind me. I will read it aloud while our inductees read it silently. The Morehouse College religious tradition was founded by William Jefferson White in 1867 and was greatly enhanced by Henry Lyman Morehouse, Charles Thomas Walker, John Hope, and Adam Daniel Williams. It reached its zenith during the tenure of Reverend Dr. Benjamin Elijah Mays. Strong, learned, slow leadership came from Reverend Dr. Mordecai Wyatt Johnson, Reverend Dr. Howard Washington Thurman, Reverend Dr. Floyd McKissick, Reverend Dr. Samuel Woodrow Williams, Dr. Charles Radford Lawrence, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Sr. and Jr., and Reverend Dr. Thomas Kilgore Jr. Because the crisis of character, education, and character values in America require more ethically and spiritually conscious, oriented role models and moral examples. I am pleased to induct you into the Morehouse College prophetic tradition, religious tradition, the Martin Luther King Jr. Board of Preachers, Board of Sponsors, and Collegium of Scholars, and do hereby charge and challenge you to be affirmative, appreciative, coherently critical, and engaged examples for this generation of students, always remembering that our vision is the creation of an inclusive global dignitarian society in which the full development of each individual's potential is the central goal. I charge you to be faithful servants, scholar, leaders, guarantors of continuity, celebrators of change, negotiators of structure, facilitators of meaning, practitioners of cosmopolitan ethics, and co-creators of the beloved world community, with the hope that we can right age-old wrongs that continue to haunt the American people and the world. Last, I charge you to use your time, talent, tender, and technology to help usher in an age of peace and nonviolence for the children and the world, to raise another generation of ethically inspired leaders committed to building the beloved world community, in token of which you are now given these citations, which lists 20 global ethical principles by which Dr. King and many Hindus, Buddhists, Muslims, Jews, Christians, Sikhs, and scientists live their lives and transform the world, testifying to this investiture, and in witness whereof, under the seals of the college and the chapel, the signatures of duly authorized officers are hereunto affixed this 9th day of April 2015. Par Dominum Nostrum Jesum Christum.
Good morning. I first want to give a nod to the beautiful young men who distributed those citations in such a beautiful way. That was Morehouse in action. Ambassador Anwarul Chowdhury, you first joined the diplomatic service in 1967 and have committed your career to champion global peace movements. You have served as Undersecretary General and High Representative of the United Nations, Ambassador to the United Nations from Bangladesh, and President of the United Nations Security Council. In this role, you established UN Security Council Resolution 1325 that defined the role of women in peace and security. You have been chairman of the United Nations Administrative and Budgetary Committee, vice president of the United Nations Economic and Social Council, and chairman and president of the UNICEF Executive Board. You established the United Nations Program of Action for the Culture of Peace, and you devised the United Nations Proclamation for the International Decade for Culture of Peace and Nonviolence for the children of the world. You have received honorary doctorates from the Soka University of Japan and St. Peter's University of the United States for your international peacekeeping activities. You have received the U Thant Peace Award and the UNESCO Gandhi Gold Medal for Culture of Peace. Your leadership includes serving as chair of the International Drafting Committee on the Human Right to Peace and chair of the International Day of Peace NGO Committee of the United Nations. You are the first recipient of the Impact Leadership 21's Global Summit Frederick Douglass Award, honoring men who are champions for women's advancement. And your legacy includes being founder of the New York-based Global Movement for the Culture of Peace, founding co-chair of the International Ecological Safety Collaborative Organization, and member of the Advisory Council of the National Peace Academy. Your scholarship has led to service as adjunct professor at Seton Hall University School of Diplomacy, an honorary patron of the Committee on Teaching about the United Nations, and member of the Wisdom Council. We are honored to hear you speak after first presenting you with the 2015 Gandhi King Ikeda Community Builders Prize this 9th day of April in the year 2015. Sir, I call you forth.
Ambassador Chowdhury, it is my great pleasure and honor on behalf of my family, the family of Martin Luther King Jr., to present to you the Martin Luther King Jr. Medal.
On behalf of Dr. Daisaku Ikeda's family and the 12 million Soka Gakkai International members throughout the world, I'm happy to present this Gandhi King Ikeda prismatic flame to you, Ambassador Chowdhury, in recognition of your compassionate vision and extraordinary leadership for championing the global culture of peace.
On behalf of the family of Mahatma Gandhi and all the people of India, I am very pleased to present to you this very big citation that affirms your good work and good name. Congratulations.
Open this up now.
There you go. is still small. Thank you, sir.
Why don't you serve him? Thank you very much. I'm deeply honored to have the opportunity to be in the exalted environment of the Morehouse College. Its history-making role as a focal point in the American civil rights movement, its outstanding spiritual, intellectual, and academic excellence, upholding the ideals of justice, equality, democracy, and global peace, and most importantly, its close bond with the modern-day saint, Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., make me proud to be standing here. Let me thank President John Sylvanus Wilson Jr., Chairman Robert C. Davidson, and Dean Lawrence E. Carter for their invitation and for conveying the decision to confer on me the Gandhi King Ikeda Community Builders Prize on the occasion of the 30th anniversary of the Martin Luther King Jr. College of Ministers and Laity. I note with deep appreciation the remarkable contribution being made by the Martin Luther King Jr. International Chapel under the inspiring leadership of Dr. Carter in transmitting Dr. King's message to inspire the generations in working for peace through nonviolent ways and means. 3 apostles of peace, whose glorious names are associated with the Community Builders Prize conferred on me today, have guided humanity in the right path in its eternal quest for peace. I believe wholeheartedly that Mahatma Gandhi's principle of nonviolence, or ahimsa, has found true reflection in Dr. King's own lifelong struggle for equality and justice. Mahatma had said that, and I quote, "Nonviolence is the greatest and most active force in the world. One cannot be passively nonviolent. One person who expresses ahimsa in life exercises a force superior to all the force of brutality." End of quote. That was Dr. King in every sense of that expression, who considered his Nobel Peace Prize as, and I quote, "a profound recognition that nonviolence is the answer to the critical political and racial question of our time, the need for man to overcome oppression without resorting to violence." End of quote. Likewise, the global leader for peace, President Daisaku Ikeda, particularly emphasizes the positive, active pursuit of peace as opposed to the absence of war, what he calls passive peace. His focus on the culture of peace through dialogue, peace through nonviolence, has been very inspiring to millions. The essence of their lives and legacy has become increasingly relevant to our world, now being threatened by a culture of war and violence. The value and relevance of nonviolence, tolerance, and democracy that they so intensely valued and preached need to be inculcated in every man and woman. The flourishing of the culture of peace and nonviolence will generate a mindset that is the prerequisite for the transition from force to reason, from conflict and violence to dialogue and peace. I believe the culture of peace is an appropriate vehicle to prepare our world in addressing effectively the complex challenges of the 21st century as we carry forward the legacy of Gandhi, King, and Ikeda. It has the potential of being transformed into a truly universal movement that builds a global citizenry whose everyday actions are guided by the values of peace, justice, and nonviolence. Their dream and aspiration continue to sustain us to struggle against injustice and oppression wherever these occur. Dr. King's clear abhorrence of nations which continue, and I quote, year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift, end of quote, is so applicable to many nations in today's world. He highlighted the oneness of humanity so profoundly by affirming that, and I quote, all life is interrelated. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied into a single garment of destiny, end of quote. Elevating the principle to where it truly belongs, Dr. King affirmed that, and I quote again, admittedly, nonviolence in the truest sense is not a strategy that one uses simply because it is expedient at the moment. Nonviolence is ultimately a way of life that men live by because of the sheer morality of its claim. End of quote. What a profound statement. The theme of my presentation is articulated in its title, The Culture of Peace, Essence of a New Global Civilization. To put this theme in an appropriate perspective, let me underscore that interdependency of today's world, if not addressed with sanity, can turn into a social, economic, nuclear, or environmental catastrophe. The magnitude of these problems requires all human beings to work together in finding realistic, rational, reasonable, and responsible solutions. Most disturbing is that today's atrocities often are directed to people living in the same community or neighborhood. Hatred and intolerance have blurred the vision of the perpetrators. Great differences still exist between peoples and regions. The world is experiencing a new era of insecurity and uncertainty. Despite all our progress, too many people live in extreme poverty and hunger, do not have access to as basic things as clean water or education and health. Unfortunately, worst hit victims of this everywhere are women and children. The first step towards examining the road to peace should start with an understanding of the implications of these realities. This I have seen firsthand as my work took me to the farthest corners of the world. What I have seen has outraged me, but also has given me hope and encouragement that there are forces who are determined to turn our planet into a livable place for all, and where human dignity has taken strong roots. Those are working hard to turn all the negative energies into a positive one, so that every individual can realize her or his highest potential and live a secure and fulfilling life. I'm always inspired by the human spirit and its resilience and the capacity to overcome all adversity. From Sierra Leone to Sri Lanka, from Mongolia to Mauritius, from Paraguay to the Philippines, from Kosovo to Kazakhstan, from Bhutan to the Bahamas to Burkina Faso, I have seen time and again how people, even the humblest and the weakest, have contributed to building the culture of peace in their personal lives, in their families, in their communities, and in their countries. And that ultimately is contributing to building a new and better tomorrow for humanity and to the global movement for the culture of peace. One all-important lesson that I have learned from this is that we should never forget that when women, half of the world's 7.2 billion people, are marginalized, there is no chance for our world to get sustainable peace in the real sense. While women often are the first victims of armed conflicts, they must also and always be recognized for their key role in the resolution of conflicts and reduction of violence. It is my strong belief that unless women are engaged in advancing the culture of peace at equal levels at all times with men, sustainable peace would continue to elude us. As has been rightly said, without peace, development is not possible. And without development, peace is not achievable. But without women, neither peace nor development can be realized. The need for the culture of peace is evident as we reflect on our own civilization, reflect on how our civilization has succumbed from time to time to human frailties of greed, ambition, and selfishness. We have seen that violence is often committed under the veil of public mandates, when in fact those are the wishes of the few in power or who have power, be they economic, political, military, even religious. As we all know, the 20th century had been the most violent in human history. With the dawn of the new millennium, with the end of the Cold War, our expectations for a peace dividend seemed realistic. But our hopes were dashed with new conflict breaking out in different parts of the world, with new actors as well as extremism and militarism on the rise. It is therefore important and necessary that we take a close look at our approaches towards bringing peace to this world, to our communities, and to each one of us as individuals. We have to find out where and why we went wrong. And obviously, we have to find better ways to establish peace. We need to remember that in the hate and violence-filled 20th century, we have seen the power of nonviolence in the sacrifices of Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. Forces of hatred and intolerance claimed their lives, but not their souls, not their spirit, not their words. We should not isolate peace as something separate or distant. We should know how to relate to one another without being aggressive, without being violent, without being disrespectful, without neglect, without prejudice. It is important to realize that the absence of peace takes away the opportunities that we need to better ourselves. to prepare ourselves, to empower ourselves to face the challenges of our lives, individually and collectively. Our absence of peace makes our challenges, our struggles, much more difficult. Here, let me express again my concern that continuing and ever-expanding militarism and militarization is impoverishing and destroying both the earth and the humankind. To that, I say that the culture of peace should be the foundation of the new global society. It should be seen as the essence of a new humanity, a new global civilization based on inner oneness and outer diversity. In this context, another dimension is worthy of our particular attention. Poverty and lack of opportunities deprive people of their dignity as human beings, leaving them hopeless and incapable of pursuing the kind of life they may deserve. I have seen this from the close quarters as I traveled extensively in the poorest and the most vulnerable countries of the world, championing their cause in my last responsibility with the United Nations. Marginalization and abuse because of ethnicity, gender, or religion, repression or bias, violence or intolerance are all closely linked to poverty and the concurrent lack of basic human rights. We must not forget that it is not only morally unsupportable, but also practically unrealistic to achieve sustainable peace without addressing squarely the crushing problems of poverty and human insecurity. Another preeminent concern that should get our attention is that the concept of security has far too long been interpreted narrowly as security of territory from external aggression and has been related to the concept of nation-states than to people. In this process, the legitimate concerns of common people and their perpetual quest for individual security in their daily lives are forgotten. End of Cold War has brought to the forefront very clearly that many conflicts and their causes are within nations rather than between nations. For most people of the world, a sense of insecurity comes not so much from the traditional security concerns, but from the concerns about their survival, self-preservation, and well-being in a day-to-day context. It is therefore absolutely essential that human security, in a broader sense, should receive priority attention of the international community. Peace doesn't mean just to stop wars, but also to stop oppression, injustice, and neglect. How can we build the culture of peace? In 1999, the United Nations adopted the Declaration and Program of Action on Culture of Peace, a monumental document that transcends boundaries, cultures, societies, and nations, and which would endure generations. It was an honor for me to chair the 9-month-long negotiations that led to the adoption of this historic norm-setting document, identifying 8 areas. Specifically, it encourages actions at all levels: the individual, the family, the community, the nation, the region, and of course, at the global levels. As a set of values, mode of behavior, and way of life based on respect for life, human rights, nonviolence, and the economic and social well-being of each and every human person, the culture of peace can be a powerful tool in promoting the global consciousness that serves the best interest of a just and sustainable peace. Dr. King advised us that, and I quote, "We must concentrate not merely on the negative expulsion of war, but on the positive affirmation of peace." However, a lot more needs to be done if the culture of peace is to have the necessary impact. It needs to move out of the international conference rooms to national parliaments, local governments, village councils, and homes. To turn the culture of peace into a global universal movement, basically all that is needed is for every one of us to be a true believer in peace and nonviolence and to practice what we profess. Whether it is at the events such as this, in places of worship, in schools, or in our homes, a lot can be achieved in promoting the culture of peace through individual resolve and action. Peace and nonviolence should become a part of our existence, a part of our daily life. This is the only way we shall contribute to humanity's quest for a just and sustainable peace in the world. As the international community is observing this year the 70th anniversary of the United Nations, which is poised to adopt the post-2015 Sustainable Development Goals, let me recall a very forward-looking global initiative which launched a global campaign for the recognition by all of the human right to peace. The campaign elaborated by underscoring that the right to live is not applied in times of war. This contradiction and the undermining of the universality of human rights must be ended by the recognition of the human right to peace. They called upon all to prevent violence, intolerance, and injustice in our countries and societies in order to overcome the cult of war and to build the culture of peace. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon asserted at the inaugural UN High-Level Forum on the Culture of Peace in 2012 that, and he said, I quote, "A key ingredient in building the culture of peace is education. Through education, we teach children not to hate. Through education, we raise leaders who act with wisdom and compassion. Through education, we establish a true, lasting culture of peace." End of quote. This statement reiterates what the program of action wants to convey by putting education as the first among its 8 action areas. The Secretary General's new global initiative called Education First is aimed at giving every child the chance to attend school, to have quality lessons, and to strengthen their core values, and thereby opportunity to become true global citizens. All educational institutions need to offer opportunities that prepare the students not only to live fulfilling lives, but also to be responsible and productive citizens of the world. For that, educators need to introduce holistic and empowering curricula that cultivate the culture of peace in each and every young mind. And for that, I pay tribute to the Morehouse College in leading the path. Indeed, this should be more appropriately called education for global citizenship. Such learning cannot be achieved without well-intentioned, sustained, and systematic peace education that leads the way to the culture of peace. Let me conclude by urging all of you most earnestly that we need to encourage the young people to be themselves, to build their own character, their own personality, which is embedded with understanding, tolerance, and respect for diversity, and in solidarity with the rest of humanity. This is very important, and we need to convey that to the young of today. We should do everything to empower them in the real sense, and I feel that such empowerment is going to stay with them for life. That is the significance of the culture of peace. That is its essence. It is the process of changing each one of us, that each of us becomes an agent of peace and nonviolence. It is not something temporary, like resolving a conflict in one area or between communities without transforming and empowering the people to sustain peace. Peace is a prerequisite for human development. Let us remember that the work for peace is a continuous process. Each one of us can make a difference in that process. Albert Einstein once said, and I quote, "The world is a dangerous place to live, not because the people who are evil, but because of the people who do not do anything about it." End of quote. Let us, yes, all of us, therefore, embrace the culture of peace for the good of humanity, for the sustainability of our planet, and for making our world a better place to live. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Thank you for complimenting the college. Now I invite everyone to rise, stand. Please, before we sing the college hymn, permit me this one privilege. Young people, young gentlemen, would Dr. Warren Stewart step out, please? I want you to see him. He, with others, will be honored this evening. We'll unveil 4 oil portraits. But I want you to see him because he is a living legend. He is the one who led a 6-year campaign in the state of Arizona when the legislature and the governors refused to ratify the federal holiday honoring Martin Luther King Jr. He took 6 years crisscrossing the state, building a coalition to make Arizona the only state overwhelmingly to ratify the passage of a bill, of a law for that holiday by popular vote. I just want you to see someone in the House to make Arizona the 50th and final state for celebrating the King holiday. Mrs. King, Coretta Scott King, honored him on Capitol Hill. Thank you so much. Okay.
He'll be autographing later his 500-page book telling the story of how they got over. And now the Morehouse hymn. Please do not rush the stage. We'll have to go through some preparations for the historic photograph. You are dismissed. Everyone will be able to take pictures in just a short moment. You may be seated until we are ready.